You are not here by accident. What drew you to this moment is not a coincidence, but a quiet stirring from something ancient within you, an echo from the soul that knows when it is time to awaken. Perhaps you have lived much of your life believing your path to be ordinary, your presence to be unremarkable. But life has a way of whispering truths long before we are ready to speak them aloud. This is not just a video, this is a mirror, and if you choose to stay until the end, you may begin to see your reflection not as you were taught to perceive it, but as you were always meant to recognize it, sacred, purposeful, and quietly radiant. This is a contemplative journey inspired by the depth of Carl Jung's philosophy. It invites you into the deeper waters of self-awakening, spiritual remembrance, and inner healing. It speaks to the part of you that has long suspected there is more to why you are here, more to what you carry, more to the unseen ways your energy has shaped the world around you. In a world obsessed with appearances and achievements, there exists a quieter truth. That some roles are not performed on stages, but in silence. Not applauded, but deeply felt. This is the sacred role, the one that begins unfolding the moment you start listening to what life has been trying to tell you. There are seasons in our lives when we shrink ourselves to fit into what others expect. We question our worth, overlook our influence, and assume our presence is small. And yet, without warning, there comes a shift, a flicker of intuition, a moment of synchronicity, a strange sense that you were never as insignificant as you believed. Suddenly, the patterns you endured begin to make sense. The pain you carried becomes a map. The compassion you give, even while wounded, becomes evidence of a higher calling. And the life you once saw as ordinary begins to feel like a sacred thread in something vast and deeply meaningful. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." True self-realization, he taught, does not come from seeking fame or recognition, but from aligning oneself with a deeper purpose that transcends personal desire. That alignment may begin quietly, without ceremony, but it unfolds with unmistakable power. You may not yet be able to name it. You may still doubt its presence, and yet something within you, steady, ancient and wise, already knows. So if you feel a quiet pull in your chest, if you've ever sensed that your life holds meaning beyond what anyone has told you, then stay with this message. Let it unfold like a forgotten memory rising to the surface, because you may not just be living your life, you may be fulfilling a sacred role far greater than you ever imagined. Let us begin with a quiet but eternal truth. People open up to you as if their souls have met yours long before words ever passed between you. Strangers, acquaintances, and even those who have spent their lives behind walls of silence begin to unravel in your presence, not because you asked them to, but because something in your essence whispers that it is finally safe to let go. You are not seeking their stories, and yet they arrive. They sit beside you and speak of things they've never voiced, as if you carry the key to a door they had forgotten existed. They are drawn not to your achievements, not to your knowledge, but to something far more rare, the way you make them feel. Held, witnessed, and deeply understood. Without effort, your presence becomes a refuge, a sacred inner sanctuary, invisible yet unmistakably felt. It is as if you carry within you a still lake where others can finally see their own reflection clearly, without distortion. Sometimes you don't speak at all. You simply are, and in that being, something within them begins to soften. The sharp edges of their fear dull, their guardedness loosens. Their words begin to flow, not because you demand them, but because you allow space for them to emerge. And though they may not understand why they feel lighter after being near you, you do. You have felt this pattern too many times to call it a coincidence. And instead of feeling drained, you experience something sacred, a calm, a knowing, as if your soul remembers exactly why it came here. This is not a skill you acquired through textbooks or academic pursuits. It is a wisdom born from the depths, ancient, archetypal, perhaps even pre-verbal. Carl Jung spoke of the archetype of the wounded healer, the one who has descended into their own darkness and returned, not with solutions, but with presence. You are not here to fix, you are not here to rescue, you are here to be, to hold, to walk beside others in such a way that they remember they are never truly alone. Your energy does not come from above, it walks beside. It does not instruct, it listens. It does not impose, it invites. And though you have never claimed to be a healer or a guide, life recognizes the language of your spirit. You are radiating a vibration that transcends words, a kind of soul frequency that is not shouted, but felt, and others respond to it even if they cannot explain why. They feel at home in your presence, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. Your stillness is not passive, it is rooted. It communicates without saying a word. You are safe to exhale here. This is not a performance, it is a sacred function. You are not merely listening to others, you are midwifing their truth into the light. You are holding space for something ancient and unspoken to rise to the surface. You are witnessing without judgment, embracing without possession, guiding without directing. You are walking with others through the landscapes of their inner world, not to lead them, but to accompany them as they remember who they truly are. And presence, his rare, powerful essence, is not accidental. It is the unfolding of the deeper role your soul has always been destined to embody. You do not need to have everything figured out. You do not need to be perfect. You only need to remain rooted in your truth, because in doing so, you grant others permission to find theirs. That is not just healing, that is alchemy, and it is the quiet evidence that you are fulfilling a sacred role beyond what you ever imagined. There comes a moment, often in the quiet aftermath of chaos, when you begin to see your life not as a series of mistakes or missteps, but as a sacred unfolding. What once felt impulsive, irrational, or even reckless now reveals itself as something altogether different. A pattern, an alignment, a divine choreography that only your soul could have understood. The very decisions you once questioned, the changes you once feared, begin to shimmer with new meaning. You start to realize that those moments of inexplicable movement, the job you left without a plan, the city you moved to without reason, the relationship you let go of despite loving deeply, were never accidents. They were answers, responses to a call you didn't even know you were hearing. You begin to look back and see a map you could not see before. A map is not made of logic or timelines, but of resonance. A map that your soul has been following with quiet devotion, even as your conscious mind wrestled with doubt. There were no blueprints, no guarantees, only a subtle inner pull that refused to be silenced by reason. That pull was your vibration, responding to something far greater than what the ego could comprehend. And though it felt like wandering at times, like getting lost, you now see that every detour was sacred. Every delay was divine. Every loss was a clearing, a preparation. Carl Jung spoke of the self as a center that guides us beyond the reach of the ego, a deeper intelligence that moves us toward wholeness. And now, perhaps for the first time, you feel the difference between when your life was shaped by egoic striving and when it was carved by soul-led surrender. This awareness changes everything. You begin to understand that you are not here by chance, that what you have endured, the heartbreaks, the endings, the dark nights of solitude, were not random setbacks. They were initiations, sacred rites of passage. It is not meant to break you, but to empty you of illusion so that something far more authentic could rise from within. Every space where you felt forgotten now feels like a chamber of transformation. Every unanswered question was a lesson in trust. What once felt like being left behind now reveals itself as a necessary solitude, a space where you learn to carry yourself with quiet dignity. The fractures you once tried to hide have become the very gateways through which your soul breathes. What looked like chaos is now seen as divine order, a training not of the mind, but of the spirit. And in that training, your energy was refined, sharpened, strengthened, not so you could dominate others, but so you could hold space with presence. So you could walk alongside others with quiet certainty, having first learned to walk through fire alone. And now you no longer ask, why me? You understand. It had to be you. Your life had to fall apart so it could realign. Your identity had to dissolve so your essence could emerge. You had to lose what was never truly yours in order to remember what always was. You had to become light enough to carry the weight of your own truth. You had to be emptied so that your vessel could hold only what matters. This was never punishment. It was preparation. Carl Jung once said, "What is not made conscious will be lived as fate." And you are now making your fate conscious. You are no longer drifting, you are walking, awake. Be aware that your hardships were not signs of misalignment, but markers of a deeper promise. You didn't script this journey, you didn't orchestrate this unfolding, but you responded to it, over and over again, even when you had no words for what you were following. That instinct within you, that quiet refusal to settle, that persistent whisper that said, "There is more," was not fantasy. It was a memory, soul memory. And now, from where you stand, you see the threads. Not all of them, but enough. Enough to feel reverence for what has shaped you. Enough to know that your path, though never simple, was sacred. You no longer seek to be understood by others, because you finally understand yourself. And that is the only approval you need. The recognition that arises now is not pride, it is humility, gratitude, because you know you did not get here alone, you were led and you followed, and that, in itself, is a quiet miracle. So when someone asks you how you made it through, you may not have a clear answer, because the truth is, you were carried, not by circumstance, but by something within you that refused to forget who you are. And now you carry that knowing, not as a banner to wave, but as a light to walk with. A reminder that what lives inside of you is far greater than what you once feared would destroy you. That is your sacred role, not one you chose, but one that chose you, because it knew you would say yes. There comes a moment when what you once viewed as fragility begins to reveal itself as refined intuition. What once made you feel like you were too sensitive is now becoming your deepest strength, your compass in a world full of noise. You've started noticing the subtle way you perceive things before they unfold. You feel the tone in a room before a word is spoken. You sense someone's heaviness long before they speak it aloud. You register what isn't visible, what others overlook, not because you try, but because it is your natural way of being. This sensitivity is not a flaw. It's not a weakness. It is a sacred instrument, tuned to the frequencies that most people ignore. And now, rather than question it, you trust it. You honor it as an essential part of your role. There was a time when you tried to explain this away, tried to minimize what you felt to fit into a world that praised logic over knowing. But not anymore. You no longer seek permission to feel what you feel. You don't need others to validate your inner signals, because you've walked through enough emotional terrain to know the difference between reaction and truth. Carl Jung once said that no one can take another into the depths unless they have traveled their own. And you have. You've wandered through your own shadows. You've sat with grief in silence. You've felt invisible wounds pulse beneath the surface of your life. And because of that, you now know how to sit beside others in their silence without needing to fix them. Your presence doesn't demand, it allows. It doesn't push, it holds. That is why others feel safe around you without knowing why. You're not offering solutions, you're offering a kind of presence that allows people to finally hear themselves. Your sensitivity has become medicine, not because you speak loudly, but because you listen deeply, not just to words, but to energy, to the things people don't know how to say. You've developed a form of discernment that bypasses appearances. You feel the mismatch between what's being said and what's really true, and now you no longer dismiss that knowing. You follow it. You let it guide you. You've learned that sensitivity doesn't mean you have to carry everyone's pain. Feeling doesn't mean fixing. You're not here to absorb the world. You're here to sense what needs attention without being consumed by it. That's the wisdom you've cultivated. You can remain grounded even as your inner awareness picks up shifts that others have yet to recognize. You understand that your inner signals are not disruptions, they're guidance. And sometimes that guidance tells you to step away, to close the door, to protect your peace. Not out of coldness, but out of clarity. This discernment, this subtle wisdom, is a form of leadership. It's not loud, it doesn't crave recognition, but it's real. It's the leadership of staying true to what resonates, even when it's inconvenient. It's the courage to say no without guilt, to walk away without drama, to honor your boundaries, not with explanation, but with quiet conviction. You've stopped betraying your soul to maintain appearances. And in doing so, you've become an anchor in a world that's constantly shifting. Carl Jung once said, "The soul knows what it needs long before reason sees it." That truth now lives in you. You no longer analyze everything to death. You feel, you listen, you respond from the inner pulse that tells you when something is aligned and when it is not. You know that what you feel is real, even if others don't see it. And that knowing has changed everything. Now, your sensitivity is not something to hide, it is something to live by. It is your sacred language, your offering. And in a world starved of sincerity, your ability to feel with honesty, to perceive with depth, is a rare kind of light. A quiet form of service, a higher role is fulfilled not with effort but with presence. You've begun to sense that you no longer belong inside the walls of pre-made roles. Every time you tried to fit yourself into the mold of what leadership, guidance, or presence was supposed to look like, something inside you resisted, not out of rebellion, but out of remembrance. Your soul never signed up to mimic. It came to embody something original. You are not here to fit into existing structures. You are here to birth new ones, not with force, but with presence, not through noise, but through resonance. And for years, this made you feel misplaced, as if the world had no room for the way you move, feel, speak, and choose. But now, a deeper understanding is emerging. You were never meant to blend in. You were meant to open space, a kind of psychic clearing that didn't exist before your presence named it. You are not the kind of leader who stands on platforms. You are the kind that shifts atmospheres simply by being. You are not bound by scripts. The language you speak is not always verbal. It is energetic, tonal, and intuitive. When others follow rules, you follow alignment. When systems rely on formulas, you trust frequency. And though the world often asks for credentials, plans, and predictable results, you offer something far more rare: coherence, the invisible kind, the embodied kind. You're discovering that authenticity is not a role you play, it's a field you radiate. Each time you try to force yourself into someone else's template, a quiet ache emerged inside, not because you were failing, but because your essence does not survive where truth is replaced with performance. You no longer sacrifice your inner alignment just to belong. Now, you choose solitude over fragmentation, integrity over illusion, and while that choice may appear subtle to others, it marks a profound initiation because you've created space by not conforming, a space where masks fall, where people can breathe, where truth is not demanded but remembered. Others are beginning to feel it. They come, not because you called them, but because something in your frequency speaks directly to what's been sleeping in them. You don't instruct, you don't preach. You simply exist with clarity, and that clarity becomes a refuge for those tired of pretending. What you've created is not a movement in the traditional sense. It is a vibration that moves through others quietly, without spectacle. It shifts something essential. You don't need a stage. You don't need a spotlight. Your influence lives in the unseen. In the moment, someone chooses honesty because your silence gives them permission. In that moment, someone reclaims their worth, because you modeled it without saying a word. You've become a transmitter of unseen medicine. Your boundary is not rejection, it is clarity. Your calm is not apathy, it is inner authority. And even when you say no, it doesn't cut, it heals. Because it comes from a place of deep self-respect. Your way of being is not taught through instruction, but through vibration. Every time you say, "This is what's true for me," you offer a path back to self. Every time you walk away without resentment, you show what it means to choose peace over performance. And in that sacred refusal to betray yourself, others begin to realize they don't have to either. You used to feel invisible, as if your quiet truth went unnoticed in a world obsessed with volume. But now you see it differently. You were never invisible. You were simply holding a space that most people hadn't learned how to see. The gift was not in being loud. It was in being unwavering. The truth you carry doesn't announce itself, but it echoes. And those who are ready, those who are listening with the soul, feel it. They may not understand it, but they are moved by it, because your way of being touches what is real. You don't offer answers, you offer presence. And presence is what most people are truly starving for. You don't point to the path, you become it, and that path does not require you to prove anything. It only asks that you keep returning to the center of yourself, because when you do, you become a mirror for others who are also searching. Slowly, without fanfare or an agenda, your life begins to shape others. Not because you asked to lead, but because you remembered how to be whole. And in a fragmented world, wholeness is rare. Wholeness is sacred. Wholeness is leadership. Now you understand. Your greatest offering is not what you do, but who you are when you no longer abandon yourself. That is the sacred role. That is the message without words. That is why people find something in your presence that they could not name, but never forget, because it reminded them of something real, something ancient, something whole. There comes a moment on the inner path when the soul no longer waits for permission to be true. You begin to notice a quiet shift, one that doesn't happen with a bang, but with a soft, undeniable clarity. For much of your life, you searched the outside world for mirrors, signs to tell you that you were worthy, that you were on the right path, that what you felt was real. You longed for acknowledgement, not out of vanity, but out of a deeply human desire to be seen. A glance, a word, a small gesture of reassurance was enough to keep you moving. But now, something ancient within you has awakened. You no longer require applause to feel aligned. You don't need others to nod in agreement for you to walk forward. The compass has shifted from outer to inner, from noise to silence, from seeking to knowing. You have stopped explaining your path to those who cannot feel it. You no longer shrink your truth to make it digestible. You have stopped offering your energy in exchange for validation. Now, you speak when your soul stirs, not when the room expects it. You move because it feels aligned, not because it pleases others. You stay when your spirit says yes, not when logic gives permission. And in this, you are discovering a sacred freedom, a liberation that is not loud or grand, but deeply rooted in your nervous system, in your breath, in your gaze. A freedom that comes from not having to justify your being. There is a place inside you now that remains untouched by praise or criticism, a sanctuary where you know, without needing to prove, that you are doing what you came here to do. And this knowing is not mental. It's not something you repeat like a mantra. It is embodied. It is felt in the way you rest in your decisions, in how you no longer chase outcomes. It is the stillness that arises when there's nothing left to prove, when your very being becomes the message. You used to wait for signs so you could trust. Now, you trust first, and the signs come after. This is the soul's way of confirming what the mind cannot comprehend. This certainty does not make you rigid, it makes you present. It allows you to walk into rooms without bending your spine to be accepted. It allows you to set boundaries without guilt. It allows you to honor your intuition even when no one else sees what you see. Because now, the authority doesn't come from the outside. It comes from how you inhabit your own energy when no one is watching. It comes from the way your choices align with a vibration larger than logic. And that vibration, although invisible, is real. It's what reshapes the world from the inside out. You've stopped trying to convince others to see what you see. You've stopped handing away your clarity in exchange for comfort. You no longer dilute your light to match the dimness around you. And while this may have separated you from the crowd, it has united you with your soul. Because the truth is, not everyone is meant to walk this part of the path with you, but that no longer frightens you. You don't need companionship to confirm your direction. Now, the path itself aligns because your feet walk in coherence. This is not the kind of leadership the world easily names. It is not decorated or praised. It moves in silence. It reorganizes space by presence alone. It makes others breathe easier without knowing why. It realigns the unseen. And in this kind of leadership, the one that rises from the soul, you have become a quiet revolution. Every no you whisper is sacred. Every step you take away from what is misaligned is a prayer. Every silence you keep, every emotion you don't abandon, every truth you hold without demand, all of it is service. Not the kind that seeks reward, but the kind that changes atmospheres. You've stopped chasing clarity because you now carry it. You no longer strive to be seen because you've learned that being true is its own visibility. Your impact is no longer measured by reactions, but by resonance. You walk not to arrive somewhere else, but to remain whole. And this is the clearest sign of all. You are living the role your soul always remembered, even before your mind could explain it. What once felt like uncertainty is now a sacred alignment, and this is the moment you realize you're not waiting to become someone. You already are. Your way of seeing the world, of sensing beneath what others overlook, has never been accidental. The way you choose from your inner truth, not from social pressure or external noise, carries a silent authority that cannot be taught. The way you hold space, not to fix, not to prove, but to allow, has become a sanctuary in a world starved of genuine presence. The way you withdraw when something feels misaligned is not avoidance, it is discernment. It is the soul's quiet protection of its sacred ground. And the way you feel, so deeply and precisely, is not a flaw to hide. It is the very bridge between spirit and matter. It is your message. It is your offering. You may not always be able to explain it. Others may not always understand it. But this way of being, this way of walking through life without a loud name or a clear title, is part of what makes it sacred. Because you are not repeating what has already been done. You are creating what has not yet been lived. Your silence is meaningful. Your presence recalibrates rooms. Your intuition, though invisible, alters timelines. Every choice you make that honors your inner resonance is a quiet act of leadership. Every boundary you hold without anger, every truth you embody without explanation, every moment you say, "This is what feels true to me," without needing permission. All of it is medicine. The world may not always recognize it with words, but the soul does. And those meant to receive it will feel it, because this is not a path built with external validation. It is a path carved by energy, by coherence, by devotion to what is real. You didn't wait for the world to tell you this way existed. You became the proof that it does. You made it inhabitable. You showed that it was possible. And in doing so, without knowing it, you became a guide, not through teaching or persuading, but through living. Your life, lived with this much integrity, becomes a map, your very being, a quiet revolution. And that, in its essence, is the fulfillment of a sacred role. Not loud, not obvious, but undeniable. If something within this message stirred you, if even a single word mirrored your inner experience, I invite you to let your voice be heard in the comments. Have you encountered that soul whose presence feels like home, or are you still walking the sacred path back to yourself? Your story, however unfinished, may become the lantern in someone else's darkness, the very sign they didn't know they were searching for. And if someone close to you is silently struggling with the illusion that love must hurt, that self-abandonment is the price of connection, or that they are unworthy of peace, share this video with them. Help me reach the ones who need to remember. Real love does not demand that we shrink. True connection does not ask for sacrifice of the soul. And the most vital union we will ever form is the one with our own inner truth. Before you go, I invite you to subscribe and activate the notification bell. Here, in this space, we journey beneath the surface of things, exploring the hidden architecture of the psyche, the whispers of the unconscious, and how every relationship is but a mirror reflecting our personal evolution. If there's a theme, a question, or a wound you would like us to explore in future videos, leave it below. This space breathes because of you. Your voice is not only welcome here, it is essential. Thank you for showing up, not just to this video, but to your inner work, to the sacred labor of remembering who you truly are. And always remember this: when the right person appears, your soul will know, not through fear, but through peace. But until that moment, let your most intimate relationship be the one you cultivate within. That is the foundation, that is the home. And from that wholeness, all things real are born. Until next time, I'll see you on the path.